Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
They've been telling me about the college fund since I was 9 years old, maybe even younger, the way parents toss around promises like candy to keep their kids aiming straight. I remember the first time I actually asked about it seriously. I was in 10th grade, and some guidance counselor had started rattling off tuition costs like they were grocery lists, only instead of apples and bread, it was 10,000 here, 30,000 there, 60,000 if you wanted the real fancy shit. I went home that day a little panicked, like I'd just heard about a coming war, but Mom just laughed and waved it off. "Oh, honey," she said while slicing carrots at the kitchen counter, "you don't have to worry about that. You've got a college fund, remember? Your dad and I started it right after you were born. It's for school only. You're taken care of." And that was that. From that point forward, every time money came up, whether it was SAT prep or applying to schools out of state, or even just buying a new laptop for senior year, they'd throw that phrase out like it was gospel. Taken care of. Those two words became the spine of all my teenage dreams. Taken care of. Covered. Already in the bag. And maybe, stupidly, I believed them too easily. But when you're 17 and the people who fed you, clothed you, taught you to ride a bike and tie your shoes tell you something, you don't sit there cross-examining them like a lawyer. You believe. That's the deal. So I applied to colleges with no fear. Got into a solid state university, nothing fancy, but respectable, known for their engineering program, which was where I wanted to go. Tuition was reasonable, housing was manageable, and most of my friends were staying in-state too. I felt good. Like I was stepping into the life I'd been building toward without even knowing it. Until July rolled around and the first tuition deposit was due. I'd sent in all the paperwork months earlier. Financial aid, grants, scholarships, though I didn't qualify for much, thanks to my parents' tax bracket being just high enough to screw me, but not high enough to actually help. So the bulk was supposed to come from the fund. I asked Dad how it was going to work. He said he'd take care of it. I waited. A week passed. Then two. The school called, asked about the missing deposit. I told them my parents were handling it. More time passed. Then it was August, and I started panicking. Finally, I cornered them at the dinner table. I still remember the smell of burnt garlic bread and that damn sound the ceiling fan made, like it was wobbling just enough to make you nervous, but not enough to fix. So I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "When's the tuition money being sent?" My mom looked up from her plate like I'd asked something embarrassing. Dad cleared his throat. "There's been a setback," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The fund isn't exactly liquid right now." I didn't even understand what that meant. I thought maybe they had it in some kind of investment that hadn't matured or whatever. I didn't know the lingo back then. I just knew something was off. "What do you mean, not liquid?" I asked. "It's complicated," he said, still not looking at me. "We had some expenses come up, but we'll figure something out." Expenses. That one word cracked the foundation of everything I thought was stable. I pushed. Mom jumped in. She started talking fast about how the economy hadn't been great, about how they'd had to refinance the mortgage a few years ago, about Ron's business being slow that winter, and how the house needed some upgrades to retain value. None of it made sense in that moment. I couldn't even find words. I just sat there, watching my future evaporate in real time over mashed potatoes and half-baked justifications. Eventually, I took out loans. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I skipped meals, cut corners, lived in shared apartments with cockroaches and busted heaters. I didn't complain. I didn't even bring it up again. I buried it deep because what was the point? I needed them to be my parents. I couldn't afford to hate them, but I didn't forget. Fast forward nearly 10 years. I'd graduated, paid off some of the loans, moved to a new city with Lisa, my girlfriend at the time, and started building something resembling a real life. My job wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough. I was stable. Not rich, not even comfortable in the way my parents once were, but okay. Then came the visit. We were back in town for a wedding. Lisa wanted to stop by my parents' place, said it was important. So I did. I hadn't been home in a while. When we walked in, I barely recognized the place. The kitchen looked like it had been plucked out of a design magazine. Granite counters, stainless steel appliances, a custom island with a built-in wine fridge, soft close cabinets, pendant lighting over the breakfast nook. I just stood there, quiet, looking at the tile under my feet, Italian stone, probably, and something deep inside me cracked like an old bone that never healed right. Nice, huh? Mom said, smiling like it was nothing. We did a full remodel a few years ago. You wouldn't believe the deal we got. I nodded, didn't say a word. But in that moment, I knew. I knew exactly where my college fund went. And I also knew, without even planning it, that someday they'd pay for every inch of it. For a long time, I told myself I was over it, that I'd let it go the moment I signed my first loan check and walked into class with a 2-day-old bagel in my pocket and 15 hours of work scheduled that weekend just to keep the lights on. I swallowed it like bad medicine, figured that's what growing up meant, accepting that not everyone gets the help they were promised, that life knocks you around a bit and you just keep your head down and move forward because what's the alternative? Self-pity? Bitterness? Who has time for that when you're 22 and already behind on everything? Lisa, of course, didn't see it that way. She's the kind of woman who reads contracts before she signs them, who double-checks every number on a receipt and can smell bullshit before the first syllable finishes. We'd been together 2 years at that point, living in a small third-floor walk-up with creaky floors and heat that only worked when you didn't need it. She'd never met my parents before the wedding trip, and after that visit, she wouldn't stop talking about the kitchen. Not the layout or the design, but the question behind it, the unspoken math of it all. Okay, she said one night, curled on the couch, nursing a glass of red wine that cost more than our weekly grocery run. So let me get this straight. They couldn't pay your tuition. But they had granite countertops, imported backsplash, recessed lighting, and 2 fridges, one of which is apparently just for drinks. I shrugged, because what the hell was I supposed to say? I hadn't confronted them when it mattered, and by now the wound was old scar tissue, ugly to look at but hardened over. Lisa leaned forward, voice soft but sharp. Aaron, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. And I knew she was right, but knowing something and being ready to do something about it are 2 different things entirely. So I kept telling her it wasn't worth the drama, that maybe there was more to the story, that people make bad decisions and sometimes they just don't know how to admit it. But deep down, I wasn't protecting them. I was protecting the version of myself that still needed to believe they gave a damn. Then came Thanksgiving. We weren't even planning to go, but Lisa thought it would be good closure, and my mom had left me 5 voicemails saying how much she missed us and how Uncle Rick would be there, and didn't I want to catch up? Uncle Rick was my dad's older brother by 7 years, and while he'd never been what you'd call classy, he had a way of telling stories that made you forget how much you didn't want to hear them. He'd show up to every family gathering in the same leather jacket he bought in the 90s and drink like it was still 1995 and his liver hadn't filed for early retirement. But he was harmless, or so I thought. That night, after the turkey was butchered and the pie had been picked clean, Rick was 2 bourbons past sober and standing in the kitchen, admiring the under-cabinet lighting like it was a damn art installation. Hell of a remodel, he muttered, half to himself, half to me. Cost a fortune, I bet. I said nothing, just nodded politely, and tried to steer the conversation back toward neutral ground. But then he said it. Well, I guess it's fair. Was your college fund, after all, wasn't it? At least it went to something that's holding value. I froze. I didn't ask a damn thing. He offered it, and in that instant, I realized how easy it had been for everyone else to move on while I sat there trying to pretend it hadn't happened. I turned to him, low voice, sharp as broken glass. What did you just say? He blinked, like he was realizing the bourbon had walked him into a minefield. Rick tried to backpedal, said something about my dad borrowing it during a slow winter when contracts were thin and the bank was breathing down their necks. Something about how mom didn't want to live with a torn-up kitchen forever and how she figured you'd understand, eventually. That's the thing about betrayal. It's not just the act, it's the casualness of it. The way people can take something that broke you and talk about it like it was just another Tuesday. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just walked outside, stood in the cold November air, and tried to keep my breathing steady. Later that night, Lisa found me scrolling through my phone like a man possessed. "What are you doing?" she asked, wrapping her coat around herself as she stepped onto the porch. "Just checking some numbers," I said. "You know, I wasn't even that mad they used it," I added, not quite sure if I was talking to her or to myself. I was just mad they lied. I mean, I would have been fine if they'd just told me. It was, what, maybe $12,000. She gave me a look that said I had to be joking. And yeah, I know now that tuition for 4 years was way more than that, but at the time, I just needed to say something out loud to keep from imploding. That weekend, when we got back home, I started pulling records. Property data. Mortgage balances. Public records from the county assessor's office. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for at first. Just numbers, just facts, just the truth they never offered me willingly. And once I started digging, I couldn't stop. Because the kitchen wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the receipt. And I was ready to collect every last dollar. There's a strange comfort in watching the world slowly collapse from the safety of distance. And I say that not out of cruelty, but because I lived it once, watching my world implode, silently, while everyone around me pretended things were just fine. So when the 2008 recession finally sank its teeth into everything and everyone, when the market choked and small businesses started dying like unattended houseplants, I didn't flinch. I watched. I waited. I paid attention. Because this time, it wasn't me on the floor. This time, the fallout belonged to someone else. By then, I'd been working in real estate finance for almost 3 years, grinding away at a mid-tier firm that specialized in distressed property acquisitions, which is a fancy way of saying we bought houses from people who were losing them and flipped them for people who had no idea what those people went through. I was good at the job, not because I was cold, but because I understood desperation. I knew the look in someone's eyes when they realized the foundation had cracked and no amount of paint or prayer was going to cover it up. It's not a look you forget. It lives in you. Echoes. I never told my parents what I did for a living. They thought I worked in housing, which is what they told their friends whenever someone asked. They had no clue I was the guy on the other end of the phone when a lien got filed, or the one whose signature helped a property slide quietly into pre-foreclosure without much of a fight. That's the thing about being underestimated. It's a perfect disguise for vengeance. Especially when you don't even have to lift a finger to make the storm arrive. I knew their business was failing before they did. Ron's little contractor gig had been bleeding out since early 2007, and by the time the market actually crashed, he was working maybe 2 days a week, doing odd jobs for under-the-table cash just to keep the lights on. I saw his name come up in a property risk report one afternoon while reviewing high-risk mortgage accounts. It was a random pull, nothing intentional. Just another file in a long chain of broken promises and overdue payments. But the moment I saw the address, my childhood home, I stopped breathing for half a second. There it was. 8 months behind on payments. Mortgage balance bloated by penalties and fees. No refi options. No second lifelines. The bank was circling like a hawk, and all it needed was one more missed payment before it swooped in. And you know what? I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel vindicated either. What I felt was clarity. Cold, clean, unshakable clarity. I watched it unfold in slow motion. There was no emergency rescue. No miracle inheritance. No anonymous donor. Just silence, delay, missed calls, and paperwork piling up like snowdrifts. I never made a single phone call. I didn't send an email or give them a heads up. I let the train roll off the tracks, and I stood back while it happened. They were the ones who taught me to fend for myself, remember? Lisa asked me once, when I started acting distant, if something big was going on. I told her the truth, or at least the version of it I could say out loud without sounding like a sociopath. My parents are losing the house, I said, pouring coffee like I wasn't talking about the home where I learned to walk. I found out through work. She looked at me like she wasn't sure whether to hug me or slap me. Are you gonna do anything? She asked. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Yeah, I said. I'm gonna watch. 3 months later, the bank moved in. The foreclosure was quiet, almost sterile, just a few notices, some signatures, and a firm deadline. They didn't even call me, not once, not even when the moving boxes came out. I don't know if it was pride or shame, but they handled it alone, and I made damn sure no one stepped in to save them. The day they moved out, I drove by the house. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there a block away, watching Ron haul the last box into the back of a rented U-Haul while Debbie barked instructions at him like they were just rearranging furniture instead of losing everything. She still wore those wedge heels she always said made her feel put together, even as the porch sagged behind her and the American dream crumbled quietly at her feet. They had no idea I was watching. They had no idea the house was already mine. I bought it at auction 2 weeks before the foreclosure finalized. Paid cash. Got it for less than what they owed on the mortgage, which felt like some cruel form of cosmic arithmetic I hadn't even asked for. The paperwork was clean. The title was mine. And the irony? I didn't even want the house. Not really. I didn't want to live there. I just wanted to own it. I wanted it in my name. I wanted it out of theirs. And most of all, I wanted the next step to come with no confusion. So 1 week after they handed over the keys and drove away from everything they thought was still theirs, they got a plain white envelope in the mail at whatever temporary address they were using. No return address. No card. Just a typed lease agreement on crisp paper and a post-it with 4 words. Let me know. Hey! That's when the phone rang. First Mom, then Dad. I didn't answer either. I was busy making copies of the keys. Because if they wanted to stay under that roof, they were going to have to pay. To me. There's a certain kind of silence you only ever hear when people are trying not to say the things that are stuck in their throats like splinters, and that's exactly the sound I heard when my parents finally called me back after they'd opened the envelope. After they'd read every line of that lease agreement and realized I hadn't bought the house out of pity or nostalgia or some pathetic urge to reconnect, but out of something colder and far less forgiving. I didn't answer the phone, of course. I watched the voicemails pile up, each one progressively more desperate, more indignant, more laced with the sort of half-sincere confusion only guilty people know how to muster. Debbie went from sad to furious in under 2 minutes flat, and Ron, true to form, stayed mostly quiet, like he'd already decided there was no winning this, and he might as well keep his head down. Lisa wasn't thrilled, I'll admit that. She sat across from me at the kitchen table the night I sent the lease agreement, her arms folded, her mouth pressed into a line so tight you'd think she was physically holding herself back from saying something that might snap whatever was left of my restraint. She read the lease twice, looked up at me with that calm, steady gaze she saved for moments when she wasn't sure if she was looking at the man she loved or a stranger she hadn't fully met yet. So, that's it? She asked. You're really going through with this? I didn't even blink. I was too far in by that point to pretend like I hadn't mapped out every inch of this already. I didn't make them homeless, I said, pouring myself a drink I hadn't earned, but definitely needed. I just gave them an invoice. She didn't argue. She didn't try to stop me. She just said one thing, just one line that clung to me long after the bottle was empty. Make sure you're doing this for the right reason, she said. And make sure you know what that reason is. They signed the lease 2 days later. Debbie didn't even call me directly. She had her lawyer email me the signed documents like this was a business transaction, which it was, though I knew it killed her to treat it that way. She must have thought I'd cave, That seeing her name in a PDF contract would shake something loose in me, some long-dormant family loyalty that would make me second-guess myself. It didn't. If anything, it cemented things. Because it wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't even about the money. It was about principle. About turning the knife just enough for them to feel the edge, but not enough to end the pain quickly. The first rent check arrived on the 5th of the month, postmarked late and scribbled with a passive-aggressive note in the memo line. Hope this helps. I cashed it the same day. The second one came a little earlier. The third arrived exactly on time. Funny how punctual people become when the alternative is losing the roof over their heads. I had the locks changed, not because I didn't trust them, but because I wanted them to know they weren't the ones in control anymore. I installed a security camera over the front door and another one facing the driveway. When Ron asked about it, soft-spoken, like he was scared I'd take the house away just for speaking, I told him it was for liability reasons. He nodded like he understood, but I saw it in his eyes. He finally realized what it felt like to live under someone else's rules. Debbie tried to play the victim. She'd leave voicemails filled with shaky voice lectures about family and forgiveness, about how people make mistakes and how I needed to stop punishing them like a stranger. I never responded. I didn't delete them either. I kept them saved, tucked away like trophies on a dusty shelf, proof that the game had finally turned in my favor. And the thing is, I didn't go out of my way to make their lives miserable. I didn't raise the rent. I didn't show up unannounced or withhold maintenance. I did everything by the book. Every interaction was documented. Every repair logged. Every communication polite, but unmistakably formal. I was the landlord they deserved, present, efficient, and completely indifferent to their comfort. I knew it was getting to them when Debbie stopped calling altogether. She'd started having the checks mailed through the bank instead of from their personal account. No notes. No scribbled passive-aggressive lines. Just cold paper, delivered on schedule, month after month. One Saturday morning, I decided it was time for a little reminder. Nothing loud. Nothing dramatic. Just a gentle nudge. I put together a small gift basket, something you might see delivered by a real estate agent congratulating new homeowners. A few locally made jams. A bottle of cheap sparkling cider. A candle that smelled like cinnamon and debt. And right in the center, nestled between the tissue paper and ribbon, I placed a polished granite sample tile. Just a single square, maybe 4 inches by 4 inches, cut from the exact same material they'd chosen for their dream kitchen. No note. No explanation. I left it on their porch and drove away. And, for the first time in years, I felt something like peace. But it didn't last long. Because I knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. The confrontation came on a Sunday, the kind of gray, sluggish day where the clouds hang low like they're waiting to suffocate whatever energy's left in you, and maybe that was fitting, because by the time Debbie finally rang my doorbell, I was already tired. Of pretending, of carrying the weight of this grudge like a badge of honor, of winning and not really feeling like I'd won anything worth having. I opened the door to find her standing there, tight-lipped and shaking, holding the granite tile in one hand like it was proof of a crime and not just the receipt I'd been waiting years to deliver. She didn't ask to come in, which was good, because I wouldn't have let her. She stood there in that worn-out beige sweater I remembered from childhood holidays and stared at me like I was someone else entirely. "You think this is funny?" she snapped, holding up the tile like it was radioactive. "You think this proves something?" I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just stood there, leaning on the doorframe, arms crossed, calm as a surgeon before the first cut. "I think it's accurate," I said. "That's what it cost, right? $24,000 of granite and stainless steel and undermount sinks and soft close drawers. Paid for with my future." Her face twisted, the kind of expression you make when someone you love tells you the truth you've been avoiding for years. She stepped forward like she was going to make a scene, and I could already see the tears boiling under the surface, but she wasn't ready to let them out yet, not until she'd tried every other trick first. "We did what we had to do," she shouted, loud enough for the neighbor's dog to start barking. You don't understand what it was like back then. We were drowning. We needed that remodel so we could refinance. We thought we'd pay it back eventually. Families sacrifice for each other. Her voice cracked on that last word, like even she knew it wasn't going to land the way she wanted. I tilted my head and looked her straight in the eyes. Yeah, I said, flat and steady. I did. For a second, she didn't move. She just blinked, like the meaning of my words was taking longer than expected to reach her. Then the tears came, hot, ugly ones, the kind you can't hold back even if your pride is still screaming at you not to let them win. You don't have to do this, she whispered, her voice smaller now, like she was shrinking into the weight of everything left unsaid. Just sell us the house. We'll find a way. We'll make it work. You don't want to be this person, Aaron. I looked past her, out toward the driveway where her old sedan was parked too close to the curb, like she'd shown up in a rush, too angry to park properly. I thought about all the years I spent convincing myself that loyalty and silence were the same thing. I thought about sleeping in basements with black mold, working doubles through flu seasons, skipping meals just to keep the loan interest from swallowing me alive. I thought about how she never said sorry, not once, not even when they handed me a contract like I was their landlord and not their son. No, I said. I'm not selling. You can keep renting if you want. Or move. Your choice. Her mouth dropped open, like she hadn't even considered that I might say no. Like some part of her still believed she had power in the situation. We're your parents, she said, desperate now. You're really going to kick us out? I didn't blink. I didn't speak for a long moment. Then I said what I'd been holding back for too damn long. You kicked me out first, I said. You just used a prettier kitchen to do it. She left without another word, the granite tile still clutched in her hand like it might still change something if she just held it tight enough. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it with my eyes closed until the silence returned. A week later, I saw the moving truck. Same driveway. Same sad boxes. Same worn-out Ron carrying lamps and taped-up furniture like it was déjà vu with a crueler twist. Debbie didn't look at me. Not once. She didn't wave, didn't try to speak, just loaded her life into the truck like she was trying to erase the last 2 decades of entitlement and damage in one trip to a cheaper zip code. I stood on the porch and watched them leave, the way you might watch a car pull away from a hospital, knowing the people inside are never quite coming back the same. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel glee. I felt something deeper and heavier and harder to name, like slamming a door that should have been shut years ago but never quite closed right until now. The U-Haul rumbled down the street, took a left at the stop sign, and disappeared like a chapter that had finally ended. I stayed there a while, listening to the quiet, breathing in the stillness of my own damn property. Not theirs. Not the family home. Just mine. And yeah, I smiled. But not because it felt good. It felt finished. And sometimes, revenge doesn't feel like victory. It just feels like finally saying goodbye.